I never imagined I'd become the neighborhood hero for taking down the HOA tyrant, but sometimes life puts you in positions you never expected. It all began on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday afternoon when I returned home from work to discover my brand new Tesla missing from my driveway. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Had I parked somewhere else? Had I forgotten where I left it? The panic set in quickly as I realized my $60,000 investment was nowhere to be found. I immediately called the police to report it stolen, but as I hung up the phone, I noticed my neighbor Karen watching me from her front porch with what I can only describe as a smug expression. Karen had appointed herself the unofficial enforcer of our homeowners association rules despite having no actual position on the board. She'd been a thorn in everyone's side since moving in 3 years ago, but this look on her face made my stomach drop. I walked across the street, trying to keep my composure. "Karen, have you seen my car?" I asked, hoping for a straightforward answer. She adjusted her designer sunglasses and sipped her iced tea before responding. "Oh, that electric monstrosity? I haven't seen it. Maybe it got towed for being an eyesore." Her dismissive smirk told me everything I needed to know. Something wasn't right. Why would it be towed from my own driveway? I pressed, feeling my heart race. "Perhaps you should check the HOA guidelines about appropriate vehicles," she said with that condescending tone she'd perfected. Section 12, Paragraph 4 clearly states that all vehicles must maintain the aesthetic standards of our community. I'd read our HOA guidelines cover to cover when I moved in 5 years ago. There was no Section 12, Paragraph 4, and certainly no rule about aesthetic standards for vehicles. Karen had a habit of inventing rules on the spot to suit her agenda. I thanked her curtly and walked away, knowing I wouldn't get a straight answer. Our neighborhood had once been a peaceful suburb on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people move to raise families and enjoy quiet evenings on their porches. Most of my neighbors were friendly, reasonable people who respected boundaries and helped each other out when needed. I'd chosen this community specifically for its sense of belonging and the pride everyone took in their homes. Before Karen arrived, the HOA had functioned as intended, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and ensuring basic standards were met. We had reasonable rules about lawn maintenance, holiday decorations, and exterior paint colors. Nothing excessive or intrusive. Karen changed everything. She moved in and immediately began appointing herself as some kind of authority figure. She carried a clipboard everywhere, taking notes on supposed violations. She'd leave printed notices that looked official but weren't authorized by the actual HOA board. She'd installed cameras pointed at neighbors' properties and would send emails with time-stamped evidence of rule violations, most of which she had fabricated. Let me explain why this matters so much in a community like ours. When someone like Karen creates an atmosphere of constant surveillance and arbitrary enforcement, it destroys the trust that makes a neighborhood function. People became afraid to let their children play outside, worried that Karen would complain about noise. Residents stopped improving their homes, concerned that Karen would find some violation in their renovation plans. The community spirit that had drawn us all here was evaporating under her reign of petty tyranny. I'd managed to stay mostly under Karen's radar until now. I kept my lawn immaculate, never left trash cans out too long, and generally minded my own business. The Tesla was my one indulgence after years of saving and a recent promotion. I'd only had it for 3 weeks, and now it was gone. The police arrived about 20 minutes after my call. Officer Rodriguez took my statement and information about the vehicle. As he was leaving, he mentioned something that caught my attention. "You know, this is the 3rd vehicle reported missing from this neighborhood in the past 2 months. All recovered, though." "Recovered? Where?" I asked, suddenly hopeful. "Impound lot over in Westridge. Apparently towed for HOA violations." He shrugged. "Weird thing is, when the owners contacted their HOA, no one knew anything about ordering the tows." I thanked him and immediately called the Westridge impound lot. Sure enough, my Tesla was there, towed at the request of HOA management for unauthorized vehicle type in violation of community standards. The impound fee was $350, plus $75 for each day it remained there. The next morning, I paid the fee and retrieved my car, seething with anger but determined to handle this properly. When I returned home, I found a laminated notice on my front door: violation. Electric vehicles prohibited in Oakwood Estates. Fine, $500. Refer to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of HOA Guidelines. There it was again, the non-existent Section 12, Paragraph 4. The notice had an official-looking letterhead, but no signature, just HOA Enforcement Committee at the bottom. I knew immediately who was behind it. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment escalated. I received daily notices for increasingly absurd violations, excessive vehicle charging, improper driveway usage, technology eyesore clause violation. Each came with its own fabricated fine, ranging from $250 to $1,000. Karen began taking photos of my house at all hours, sometimes standing directly on my property to do so. I installed security cameras of my own and documented everything. I also reached out to our actual HOA board president, Michael, who confirmed what I already knew. Karen held no position of authority, there was no enforcement committee, and none of these rules or fines were legitimate. She's been doing this to half the neighborhood, Michael admitted. We've sent her cease and desist letters, but she ignores them. People just pay the fines because they're afraid of her. Afraid of what? I asked. She's vindictive. The Johnsons stood up to her last year about some rose bushes, and she called the city code enforcement on them every week for months. Found some obscure ordinance about their fence height being half an inch too tall. Cost them thousands to fix. I was documenting each fake violation and building a case, but Karen must have sensed I wasn't intimidated. That's when things took a truly bizarre turn. I came home one evening to find my garage door open and my Tesla missing again. This time, I didn't panic. I checked my security footage immediately. The video clearly showed Karen using some kind of electronic device to open my garage door. She then entered my garage, somehow started my Tesla, and drove it away. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was grand theft auto. I called Officer Rodriguez directly and showed him the footage. He was as shocked as I was. This goes way beyond HOA disputes, he said. This is a felony. We'll put out an APB for your vehicle and her. But I had another idea. What Karen didn't know was that my Tesla, like all newer models, had built-in GPS tracking. I pulled up the app on my phone and saw that my car was currently parked at a storage facility about 5 miles away. I shared this information with Officer Rodriguez. Let's not tip our hand yet, he suggested. I know the sheriff who handles vehicle theft cases. Let me bring him in on this. The next day, Sheriff Donovan met me at my home. He was a tall, imposing figure with 30 years of law enforcement experience and a particular distaste for neighborhood tyrants. He dealt with plenty in his career. Here's what we're going to do, he explained after reviewing all my evidence. We'll monitor the Tesla's location. Based on the pattern so far, she'll probably move it again or try to demand some kind of ransom from you disguised as a fine. When she does, we'll be ready. We didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, I received an email from HOA enforcement stating that my vehicle had been confiscated due to multiple violations and would be released upon payment of accumulated fines totaling $4,750. The email instructed me to leave cash in an envelope under the mat at the community clubhouse. I forwarded the email to Sheriff Donovan, who was impressed by the brazenness of the extortion attempt. She's escalated from harassment to theft to extortion. This is going to be a substantial case. We set up a sting operation. I prepared an envelope with marked bills, and the sheriff's department set up surveillance around the clubhouse. I placed the envelope as instructed and waited in an unmarked car with Sheriff Donovan. Karen arrived precisely at the time specified in the email. She looked around furtively before entering the clubhouse. When she emerged with the envelope and checked its contents, Sheriff Donovan gave the signal. Deputies converged from all directions, catching Karen completely by surprise. The look on her face was priceless, pure shock giving way to indignation. "This is HOA business," she shouted as they handcuffed her. "I have authority to collect fines." Sheriff Donovan approached her calmly. "Ma'am, you have no such authority. What you do have is a list of charges including grand theft auto, breaking and entering, extortion, mail fraud for those fake violation notices, and criminal impersonation of an authority." While Karen was being processed at the station, we recovered my Tesla from the storage unit she had rented under a fake name. Inside the unit, we found a treasure trove of evidence. Dozens of fake HOA letterheads, records of fines she had collected from neighbors totaling over $30,000, and even equipment used to bypass garage door openers and car security systems. The case against Karen was airtight. She was charged with multiple felonies, and as news spread through the neighborhood, more victims came forward. The district attorney was building a case that would likely send her to prison for several years. In the aftermath, our community experienced a remarkable transformation. Neighbors who had been intimidated into silence began talking to each other again. People who had paid Karen's fake fines filed claims to recover their money. The actual HOA board held a community meeting to clarify the real rules and establish proper channels for addressing concerns. Michael, the HOA president, approached me at the meeting. "You know, we've been trying to figure out how to deal with Karen for years. No one had the courage to stand up to her the way you did. I just documented everything and called in the proper authorities," I said. "Anyone could have done it. But no one did," he pointed out. "Sometimes it just takes one person refusing to be bullied to change things for everyone." Karen eventually accepted a plea deal that included restitution to all her victims, 5 years of probation, and a ban from serving on any HOA or community organization. She sold her house and moved away, unable to face the community she had terrorized for so long. As for me, I still drive my Tesla around the neighborhood, but now I get waves and smiles instead of fake violation notices. Sometimes standing your ground against a bully isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting everyone who couldn't or wouldn't fight back. Our community is peaceful again, the way a neighborhood should be, with reasonable rules reasonably enforced and neighbors who look out for each other instead of looking for violations. The experience taught me that when faced with someone who manufactures authority, the best response is to appeal to real authority. Karen's power existed only because people believed in it. Once that belief was shattered, her entire house of cards collapsed. Real justice doesn't require revenge or stooping to a bully's level. It just requires patience, documentation, and the courage to say enough. Total _char_count, 12,458.